You didn't stumble onto this video by accident. I need you to sit with that for just a second. Because right now, whether you're exhausted, whether you're pretending to be okay, whether something deep inside you is quietly falling apart, this message has found you. Carl Jung believed there are no coincidences, only things we weren't ready to understand yet. And here's what makes this urgent. What Jung warned about over 100 years ago is happening to you right now, today, in the way you scroll, in the relationships that drain you, in the smile you put on for everyone else while something inside you is quietly screaming. He called it the wound we refuse to look at, and the longer we ignore it, the louder it gets. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear in the next might be the most important thing someone has ever said to you. Not because I'm saying it, but because you already know it's true. Carl Jung was not a comfortable man. He wasn't the kind of thinker who told you that everything would be fine. He was the kind who looked you dead in the eye and said, "You are lying to yourself, and it is costing you everything." Born in Switzerland in 1875, Jung spent his entire life trying to understand the human soul. Not just the mind, not just behavior, but the deep, invisible architecture of who we are. He was Sigmund Freud's most brilliant student, his most trusted colleague. And then they had a falling out, a real devastating break, not over money, not over ego, over truth, because Jung refused to reduce the human being to just trauma and desire. He believed we were something bigger, something with purpose, something on a journey, and that painful, confusing, beautiful journey, he called individuation. The process of becoming who you were always meant to be. But here's the part that nobody tells you. Individuation doesn't start with peace. It starts with a reckoning. And that reckoning begins with something Jung called the shadow. Let me ask you something. And I want you to be honest, not with me, but with yourself. Is there a version of you that you've been hiding? Maybe it's the anger you've been told is wrong to feel. The ambition you've been told is selfish to want. The grief you've been told you should be over by now. The part of you that's terrified, absolutely terrified, that if people saw the real you, they would leave. Jung had a name for all of that. He called it the shadow. And here's what most people get wrong about the shadow. They think it's evil. They think it's the villain inside them, something to be destroyed. But Jung said something radically different. The shadow is 90% pure gold. The very things you've buried, suppressed, locked in the basement of your personality. Jung believed those were often your greatest gifts, your deepest passions, your most authentic self. The child who was told they were too sensitive buried their empathy and spent decades wondering why they felt empty. The teenager who was told to be realistic buried their creativity and spent years in a career that paid the bills but killed their soul. The adult who was told to stop being so intense buried their passion and woke up one morning in a life that felt like a costume, belonging to someone else entirely. Does that sound familiar? If it does, if something in your chest just shifted, I need you to understand something. That discomfort, that recognition, that's not a wound reopening. That's a door, finally cracking open. But here's what Jung warned. And this is the part that cannot wait. If you refuse to face your shadow, it will face you. Not in therapy, not in meditation, in your relationships, in your worst arguments, in the choices you make at 2 a.m. when no one is watching, in the pattern that keeps repeating itself, no matter how many times you swear this time will be different. Jung called this projection. When we haven't owned our shadow, we see it in everyone else. The anger we refuse to admit we have, we call other people angry. The jealousy we won't acknowledge, we call other people jealous. The fear we won't face, we dress it up and call it judgment. And the tragedy, the real tragedy is that we go through our entire lives fighting battles on the outside that were only ever meant to be won on the inside. But here's the part of Jung's message that most people never reach because they stop at the shadow. They hear there's a dark side of you, and they close the door. Don't close the door, because on the other side of the shadow is something Jung spent his life pointing toward. He called it individuation, and it is the most radical act of courage a human being can perform. It is the decision, not made once but made every single day, to become whole, not perfect, whole. Jung didn't believe you needed to become someone new. He believed you needed to return to someone ancient, the self that existed before the world told you who to be, before the survival strategies, before the masks. And here's how he described that self. He called it the self with a capital. He said the deepest core of your being, that is, beyond the ego, beyond the persona, beyond the role you play at work or in your family or in that group chat. The self is the part of you that knows. It knows when you're lying to yourself. It knows when a relationship is wrong, even when your logic defends it. It knows what you actually want versus what you've convinced yourself you should want. It knows when you're shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold you. Jung said the self speaks to us constantly, through dreams, through synchronicities, through that persistent ache that we dismiss as nothing. That ache is not nothing. That ache is a compass, and individuation is learning to follow it, even when it's terrifying, even when it costs you things, even when the people around you don't understand. Let me tell you what that looks like in practice. Because this isn't just philosophy. This is your life. It looks like the person who finally ends the relationship that looked perfect on paper, but felt like slow suffocation. It looks like the woman who puts down the performance of being fine, and for the first time in 15 years, tells the truth about how she feels. It looks like the man who admits quietly to himself, in the dark, that he doesn't actually want the life he's been building, and instead of that breaking him, it frees him. Individuation is terrifying, and it is the only path to feeling actually alive. Jung left us 3 truths. Not advice, not affirmations, truths, and I want to give them to you directly, because this is the part that cannot wait. Truth 1, what you resist persists. Jung said, and I want you to really hear this, what you resist not only persists but will grow in size. The anxiety you refuse to sit with gets bigger. The grief you won't feel doesn't go away. It comes out sideways, as anger, as numbness, as addiction. The version of yourself you keep pushing down becomes the version that hijacks your life at the worst possible moments. The only way out is through. Stop spending your energy building walls around what hurts. Spend it sitting with it, naming it, giving it room to exist without destroying you. That is not weakness. That is the bravest thing a human being can do. Truth 2, your life is the creation of your unconscious mind. This one is uncomfortable. Stay with me. Jung believed that the vast majority of what drives our choices, our relationships, our repeated patterns, happens below the surface of our awareness, in the unconscious, in the parts of us we haven't looked at, which means if you keep ending up in the same kind of relationship, if you keep self-sabotaging at the moment of breakthrough, if you keep feeling like life is happening to you rather than through you, the answer isn't out there. It's in here. You are not a passive recipient of your life. You are unconsciously creating it according to the beliefs, wounds, and stories that live in the parts of you haven't yet examined. The good news? Once you see it, you can change it. But you have to look. Truth 3. The most important question you will ever answer is, who am I, really? Not who did your parents need you to be. Not who your culture approved of. Not the version of you that gets likes or promotions or keeps the peace. Who are you, really? Jung spent his entire career saying that this question, not wealth, not success, not relationship status, this question is the center of a meaningful human life, and most people never ask it. They drift, they perform, they achieve, and they reach the end of their lives with the bewildering, heartbreaking sense that they never quite showed up, not because they failed, because they never dared to ask who they actually were. I want to talk to you for a moment, not as a narrator, but as someone who has sat with these ideas in the middle of the night when nothing else made sense. Jung's work doesn't give you easy answers, doesn't give you a 5-step plan. It gives you something harder and something more real. It gives you permission to be complicated, permission to be unfinished, permission to not have it all together, permission to be exactly where you are, and to also want something more, something truer, something that actually feels like you. If you're at a crossroads right now, a real one, not a metaphor. If you're staring at a choice that feels like it might break you either way, I want you to hear Jung's voice, not mine. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not the person who survives. Not the person who is loved for being palatable. Not the person who keeps the peace at the price of their own peace. Who you truly are. And maybe, see, just maybe, that's why this video found you today. Not to give you answers, but to remind you that the questions you've been afraid to ask deserve to be asked. The life you've been quietly aching for deserves to be lived. And the version of you that exists beneath all the armor, beneath the performance, beneath the exhaustion of being someone everyone else can manage, that version of you is not gone. It's waiting. It has always been waiting, and it cannot wait much longer. Before you go, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it, not in your head, in the comments. What is the one thing about yourself that you've been refusing to look at? You don't have to say it perfectly. You don't have to be brave in a big way. Just one word, one sentence, one honest thing. Because Jung also said this. Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. So say the thing, even here, even to strangers. Especially here, if this message found you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs it. Not because it's a good video, but because somewhere, someone is carrying something heavy and doesn't know that what they're feeling has a name.